Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. You may have seen me post a message to Trevor there to say I'm here, but I'm not on the stage. And by the power of technology, I am on the stage now. So wonderful to just move around the room and to hear really some of the student responses to those questions, and indeed the conversation that was going on with advisors. And I'm really, really keen for us to sort of, if you like, maybe summarize some of those sort of points. And I'll just do it quickly, and then I'm going to invite really a panel discussion so that we can kind of hear from the panel what they heard and what their thoughts were. So when the panel members are ready, please do come and join me on the stage, as it were. But just while we're doing that, let me just give you a few insights that I picked up really from bouncing around the room. The first insight I really picked up on about what's working well in career services is that there wasn't a stunned silence and that none of the students could answer that. If anything, the students were very positive around career services having an open door policy, signposting, and helping students gather their own information was one of the things that I'd picked up. That students being able to search for themselves. And there was a big discussion on most tables about how are you finding hybrid? Does hybrid work for you? And really a mixed response. To some extent, the majority saying hybrid works really well, particularly for mature students who are maybe combining study with part-time work as well. But that sort of having contact in person was something that came across as well. I thought it was interesting in our panel. I'm going to pose a few questions to them, but the other observation just going around about the personalized and the innovative and the accessible. One of the things that jumped out for me from one of the students was you need to mix it up in terms of having lots of different tools, having lots of different ways to communicate with the students, having lots of different ways to connect students to employers. And one person in the group I was in talked about it's fantastic to get access to all these big employers, but what about the SMEs that are out there? How can students really get a good feel for a whole range of different types of organizations that they might want to work with? And then the final thing before I move on to our panel to ask a few key questions, the big thing that came across is the fear factor, the anxiety and the imposter syndrome that the students have kind of affirmed as something that if they're not experiencing that, then certainly their friends are. And I loved the idea of the 3 words. And we can see Breida's put up here, informative, innovative, collaborative. Wouldn't that look great on a social campaign for a career service? It says it simple in 3 words. So we're going to now have a discussion thinking about these sort of maybe 4 or 5 questions. And I hope the audience that you'll ask questions as we go along as well. So this is just to get the conversation going. And maybe rather than introduce every single person, just whenever you answer, if you could just first of all introduce yourself, that would be great. So let's begin. Shall we go to Northern Ireland? And I'm not biased or anything here, but Shona, let's start with you, University of Ulster. Tell us a little bit about you, and then I want you to answer the question about what do you think are the implications for careers work at 3rd level?
Yeah, well, hi everyone. My name is Shona McCloy, Employability and Career Services at Ulster University. We had a discussion at the last roundtable session. Students were I think that some of what the students are saying are really talking to the future of HE career service and some of those big challenges that we have. I think this is probably a time to work in HE careers provision, but I think it's really important level that we understand the big picture that we're operating in, and that we can contextualize that for our staff in a digestible way for all of our stakeholder groups in terms of academic staff, employers, and so forth. For us, the big issues are student engagement and student success, and how actively and collaboratively across the institution to focus our efforts on that big important. We're not just within the bubble, but we're feeding the big picture within our own institutions as that we understand what those main drivers are. There's obviously so many different changing business practices, and we have to come up with the mold and model services that we can all get behind effectively. It doesn't matter, but I think whatever your service model is, have confidence in it, and make the best effort that you can to serve all those key stakeholders that you're working with. So those are just a few of those strategic issues that I think we're dealing with.
Oh, that sounds great, Shauna, thank you. Maybe I'll go over now to Caroline. Caroline, again, just introduce yourself and what are your thoughts about implications for careers work in third level? Yeah, I think.
Apologies. My name is Caroline Kennedy and I work in National College of Ireland, and I've been there now for almost 19 years. And before that, I suppose, a background in recruitment. We had really two students who gave us such great insights actually into their thoughts on career services and issues affecting career services and how to make them, I suppose, more engaging as well. But for us, strategic issues within our service would be things like tackling gaps in graduate outcomes. So, for example, looking at students maybe who get a SUSI grant, how do they compare to students who don't get a grant? Looking at students with a disability, how do they compare to those who don't have a disability? Looking at international students and how do they compare to EU students in graduate outcomes. So they're something that we're quite concerned with and we're always looking at within our service in terms of strategy. And then, like Shauna said, I suppose student engagement is something that's always front of our mind. And then how do we marry the student engagement with employers? And like everybody, how do you scale it but keep it personal? And how we do that, I suppose, is try to use employers to deliver some of the work that we need done. And then I suppose in our workshop there, what we were talking about in terms of that students said they particularly liked within their career services was they really valued the workshops, the CV clinics, the interview clinics, the nuts and bolts of the career service. And then one of the students was saying, it's really interesting that sometimes, they can be down on themselves, and really what they found they loved about their career service was that the person there could see the value they could add, the value the student had to offer, and were able to, I suppose, lift them back up when things got difficult for them and get them to see their own good points and their strengths. And then something, again, we were talking about a little bit was, I suppose students, they're very busy and they do have a tendency to procrastinate. So we did talk about, embedding careers in the curriculum to make it unavoidable and to, I suppose, overcome some of those obstacles you have with trying to get students time. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and it certainly sounds as though it's that balance, isn't it, between embedding it in the curriculum and also having that helpful, efficient, and absolutely necessary service, which are the three words that Joyce O'Hara has used on behalf of her group. And Mary Rose says, insightful, modern, and underappreciated. So that's another different take on it, isn't it? Let me go over to Catherine now. Catherine, just tell us what your thoughts are in relation to that careers work in third level and implications.
Thanks, Deirdre. Yeah, like everybody, we had a great group and two students, three who dropped in and out, but I suppose that insight again around engagement, embedding employability, but I think maybe another angle to bring into it was around that idea of confidence and the nature of where your social background, to tap into some of the conversations we had earlier on, and how that experience and or lack of confidence in engaging in the support service is something that the careers need to keep foremost to their mind, and from that student perspective of maybe not feeling they knew enough to attend a careers appointment, or maybe not knowing enough about the careers development within that. So I think that was an angle that our students definitely brought. There was the balance of the benefit of accessibility of online, and how that has worked very well for students, and possibly even democratizing some of that access of information, so that students were able to access information, maybe use things like the question format in Instagram for asking questions, and not feeling intimidated by that as well. So I think they were important. There was also the balance of having so many tools, but not knowing how effective they are. So that idea of there's sort of an abundance of tools there, but what really works well, and back to the idea of having that, I suppose, again, confidence to engage and know how to engage with those type of tools in the right way. And one other then takeaway in terms of the services is the importance of personalization. And connecting that to the curriculum in a way in which is scalable, so that you're studying a particular program and you might feel that some of the services are too generic for what it is that you're studying, whether that be in a creative type of course whereby portfolios are required, but you're not seeing that type of support coming in there. So working with academic teams and advocates of students who've used that type of support service in the past. So there's some additional points to add on what both Caroline and Shauna has mentioned.
No, that's great, Catherine. Thank you. And I think that sort of curriculum and scalable activities is really important. And I think we're seeing that as a thread throughout the conference around how to get that balance between having very personalized services, but also making sure that you look after the academics who actually really should be your career champions. And I know that sometimes that's not always easy to achieve. I'm going to go to Dave, and then Angela, and then David. So Dave, any thoughts from you? Oh, sorry, Dave, you're on mute. I thought only I do that. So yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes, thank you.
Off mute again. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, this when you give a question to a student and you ask different groups, then the last group, it's very hard for them to answer because all the answers have been given in the first place. So just really to endorse what everybody has said there. I mean, for us, one of the things that came out from students, the word confidence again, I think it was just mentioned there, and one or two students, they said they didn't engage because they didn't feel they had the confidence to engage in that one-to-one way, in a face-to-face, where it was easier to engage at a distance via the online forums, which is kind of interesting in its own right. And I think there is a culture now of engaging more easily in various online fora. I know I said at the group, I have a 16-year-old who won't pick the phone up to anybody. It has to be just that online remove. So that's an interesting one from a sociological perspective that we have to, I think, bear in mind. I think another thing that came out, just to add into some of the things that were said as well, was the engagement and the messaging that we give. Are we saying something? There's a line by Morrissey from the Smith about my life. Are we engaging with students with messages that pertain to where they're at that point in their life? I mean, some of the words where you like confidence, like I feel a bit lost, I'm anxious. And if you feel anxious, it's very hard to actually put your hand up and go, I feel anxious about my career. That takes a lot of confidence to that. We don't have the confidence, it becomes a vicious cycle. So maybe in our own messaging, the way in which we reach out to people, we use the emotive language and say that it's okay, actually. That's common enough of our experience working with students. So you are not alone. You're not sailing that ship alone. And getting students' attention again in the plethora of social media that is out there is very, very difficult. As 75% of advertising works, we don't know which 75%. So you got to do the whole lot. And where do we sit within that? I think from a future development perspective, from our own side of things, I think it's our identity as roles, as career coaches, career practitioners, career consultants, whatever we call ourselves. I think our role is broadening in some ways. It's interesting that you used the word well-being before, where we were around career. it's very positive in this in the respect that you can't compartmentalize career from life, and that's life coaches seem to have a much greater kudos than we have. Yet we've got the theoretical background and all to back it. So I think that's something we have to be very proud of our own identity and where we add value. And that, as you say, getting the metrics and the data, that's something we need to develop in our own service to say, here's how we add value, and not being ashamed of who we are, and really putting ourselves out there, being proud of what we do and how we do what we do. And some of the other points that were raised on, scalability, sustainability. I think sustainability as an agenda is an interesting one. I won't take much more time. The way all courses are going to have some elements of sustainability, and even thinking about personal sustainability is an interesting topic from our perspective, how we support that and the skill set that are required to support that.
Absolutely. And I think, Dave, what you're also reminding us is that sort of psychological safety that individuals need. We all need a bit of psychological safety if we're going to go into an environment that's new, or if we have an immediate burning problem that we need support with. So thank you for those words of wisdom. I love Norman's proactive, caring, helpful 3 words. Aren't they wonderful? If students really felt that that's what career service was all about. Fiona says helpful, welcoming and efficient. Angela, tell us what your thoughts are on this subject.
Yeah, again, I suppose like what Dave said, there's some very, very good comments passed before me, but I found it very, really, I thought it was great to kind of, I'm going to start with probably the last question that was asked was it 3 words to describe your service. And, we had some very good, with Ciara and Deirdre that came up with comments: modern, caring, dynamic, welcoming, hardworking, very helpful and approachable. And I just thought, conference like this, and we involve students, I feel, oh my God, I'm now going to be called out on what I'm not doing, and I felt the words that the students said there really have given me a lot of kind of solace, and, I'm not doing a bad job. Our service isn't doing a bad job, because there's always the challenge, whether you're a large service or a small service, is, I've tried to kind of come to terms with, look, I need every student in our college to know we exist. I can't see every student, I couldn't cope with every student, but I want them to know, we exist. And I suppose that balance, as Caroline said as well, and we've all said, is offering a personal service, but yet trying to keep it personal, but just trying to cover it all as well. And another thing I thought throughout the day, I suppose what came up for me was every year we write out a welcome back newsletter to students, and I have a line in it: if you're unsure of what you want, still contact us, and it's amazing how many students, and that's come across today, don't know why they're contacting you. Or you might say, look, just wondering what brought you here today. He said, I'm not too sure, I heard my friends talking about it, I wasn't doing it, so I said I better contact you. So again, I suppose just for students to feel, and it was interesting, some students saying, look, I didn't know what to say, or I was nervous, I didn't think it was organized enough to contact you. And that pressure, God love them, that they're feeling there. They were kind of thoughts that came from me. And I suppose also the other question 4, like, what practical steps? Now, I love that, because I'm a practical person. So the advice and ideas that came up in our session as well, get the academics more involved, again, involve the students. And there's 2 simple things, but sometimes you forget about them, but yet that's what students were saying. And to one of our students, again, they were saying, tell the academics about what you do and the great work, because they're in front of us every day. And I was just saying, it's a question we asked our students: how best can we engage with you in a survey? And they, again, over the 100 years I'm working in careers, I would always ask that question, and they all come back and say, look, tell the academics about you. But it's interesting when you say that to the academics, their thinking is, look, you email the students, you're informing them, they should know you exist. We're trying to, develop an independent learner. So it still is interesting what the students think, what the academic think. And it is a bit like what the employer's expectations, students' expectations, and ours. So it was great for all that just to come back up and to see it. It is a challenge. And, years and years ago when I was serving students, they said the exact same. and
Yeah.
they're still saying the same thing involved in
Same thing.
academics. You know,
Angela, what's interesting, you know, sorry to cut across, but what's interesting, you know, we're talking about, you know, the need to kind of educate the academics. But also I'm seeing here, Judy is putting in how lovely it is having the student voice represented here today. So I suppose one of the things maybe from this conference, which the organisers have to be commended for, is that, you know, that co-creation idea, that the students are your voice. And in essence, they influence the academics rather than you having to do all of the heavy lifting on that as well. So that's food for thought. David, is there anything you would like to add on this before we go into our next question, which I have in mind about the implications of future service delivery? Anything that hasn't been said that you would want to add?
Yeah, I suppose just around that accessibility piece. And I think we had a discussion around the sort of growth in technology, obviously, in platforms and the delivery of sort of career supports. And I think there was a positivity around that. But I think with a side note that people need to know how to use that technology, and we need to try and make it as seamless and as simple as possible for people to engage with it whenever they're busy, maybe logging in and out of different systems. So I think it was quite interesting to think about that. Sometimes when we think we're simplifying the student experience through the use of technology, we could be complicating it if we're not actually properly communicating out how to engage with it and how to make that as part of the sort of educational process. As other people have said, there was a lot of discussion around embedding careers within the curriculum with a sense that that was the best way to do it. And also to maybe, I suppose, stop so many people coming to a career centre at a point when they've got a problem. You know, they need to get a CV sort of submitted tomorrow, or they have an interview tomorrow. So their first interaction with careers can be at that point of maybe panic and anxiety, which isn't necessarily developing the sort of relationship we want. So embedding in the curriculum develops that sort of process over time. Mm-hmm. And I suppose alongside that, the student thought around engaging students as early as possible in the education process rather than towards the end of it when a transition is sort of on the horizon. And I'll just finish, Deirdre, with what we came up with last. It was our student made a really interesting observation, and he was saying about how Ireland treats careers, and by that the meaning was the focus in second level is about getting into a degree, not what the degree is going to get you into at the end of the day. And that's the starting point. A lot of students come into university and they feel they've achieved what they were set out to achieve without that further thought. So I thought that was a really interesting and important observation. And his 3 words for his service were open, safe and informative, which struck a chord with me when you were mentioning that sort of psychological safety piece.
Absolutely. No, that sounds great. And interesting around the world when you look at some of the discussions that are taking place around career development and career aspirations, that there is a move, particularly in Australia, parts of Canada, around career-related learning early in primary schools, where there's an evidence base that says gender stereotyping and unconscious bias can happen as early as the age of 7. So certainly there's still quite a lot to be done there. Just thinking about future service delivery, is there anything you want to add, David, in terms of future service delivery, what you think needs to be in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think on that side of things, it was about being much more coordinated at the institutional level in terms of using the sort of people that we can co-create or can sort of use to inform our work. And by that, I mean people like class reps, obviously student unions, the alumni and graduates who can get involved with mentoring and sort of that sort of side of career development. And I think that side of it came up much more. You know, obviously we've got the job search, we've got the CVs, the interviews, you know, the nuts and bolts, as I think Caroline mentioned earlier on, of what we do, but more of a focus on that personal development piece using other stakeholders. I think with one slight caveat around the use of employers in terms of them coming onto campus or engaging with our students in this context for personal development, professional development, and not for recruitment. So they're coming in as a mentor or as a facilitator of student learning rather than someone with a recruitment hat on. in that particular instance. And also an interesting project that got flagged at, I think it was NUIG, where there's a whole series of student success coaches been brought in and predicated upon the Design Your Life concept, which people will be familiar with these days. I'm not going to say anything about it because I didn't get a chance to learn anything about it other than that's coming in, and I think still trying to figure out where other people in universities who have related roles to ours can input and where we can work together and still have boundaries when boundaries are needed.
I can see, David, in the chat, Joyce has mentioned peer mentorship, which came up in their group. So that's, a really good illustration of the point that you've just made. Shauna, what about you in terms of sort of thinking about future service delivery? Anything, specific that you think we need to attend to?
I know that a lot of the comments have been around that whole embedding employees. That we probably do need to think more through an integrated lens around how we embed sustainability, digital literacy, internationalization, placement skills. We need to be collaboratively across our whole institutions to make sure that we're not tripping over each other and collaborative and fit for way. And I think that focus on the student learning experience for career services is really important. And I think that was the big takeaway from our group, is that the student voice came through really clear that there was a lack of ability to translate the subject specific knowledge, skills and experience in the real world. And I think that we are part of the solution in terms of how we do that. When we look at the whole value of higher education and why to come into this learning experience, we also have a role environment, the extracurricular, the co-curricular, the work that we do with employers, help students to develop and build that framework as well. I think it's going to be really important. I know really challenged, and it came up in our discussions as well, and of personalization from our students. To balance that with the fact that students are coming onto campus for an experience and for touch points that are going to enhance their outcomes. So career service play in that, and I know that we're really doing a, why would students come into an employability and career space? What does that space do? What does it look like? Kind of pop-up activity do we have to have across the various different campuses? Taking our services to students and not relying on them having to come in, book appointments and find what it is that they're looking for. So I think that really carefully. We're looking at designing career services of the future, and we have to think about the and making sure their practices are inclusive and take a really considered effort to make sure that we understand those broad-based needs that our students have. So the challenge for us is that whilst businesses and the world of work is changing rapidly, sometimes universities are not just as quick to respond like to be. So I think that we have to give ourselves a little bit of think through what some of the longer term and not react suddenly that technology is the answer to everything, because
well, that's a really, really great point, a series of points that you made there, Shona. And I think we can see again in the chat that balance between personalised support and general support. And as you say, technology isn't going to answer, it's not going to be the solution for everyone. And I really am delighted to hear that you raised the point, around disadvantaged students as well. And I think it was a point that was made by Caroline earlier about students with social capital and those who perhaps have less social capital. How can you make sure that you're not serving the needs of those that can help themselves quite easily, whilst maybe the others who aren't coming forward need to do so and could greatly benefit from your service? It's a very, very tricky one. Caroline, what about you in terms of sort of future service delivery?
Okay, so what did we were saying challenges, I suppose, in terms of future service delivery. One of the students made an interesting point, which is completely fair. You know, sometimes we're looking for something a bit more interesting to do in our spare time, which is where I suppose the idea of how do you make it embedded and make it a requirement in some areas, because, you know, people are having trouble dividing their time. Then another careers advisor was saying, you know, I suppose the challenge really is how best to use our time, particularly maybe if you're a one-man service or a one-woman service, how do you best use our time? And the focus really being on the user experience, you know, and the user experience being both students, academics, employers and alumni. And then another challenge that we spoke about was, you know, we were talking about how technology is evolving, but when we asked the students, look, do you like those different technological aids that are there at the moment, they weren't really that keen, to be honest. And yes, they're necessary. They were saying, you know, I suppose to hit the numbers that you need to hit, but really they had a keen preference for those kind of conversations to be done with a person. And then I think another challenge is servicing, you know, a diverse student base, because, you know, you've people coming from so many different backgrounds, so many different countries, with so many different requirements and needs and all the rest of it, that they're all the challenges. And then in terms of opportunities, things we spoke about, I'm just trying to read my writing now, was things that we keep mentioning here is how to tailor it. And students and advisors in our chat were saying how important it is. You know, yes, the interview answers might be kind of similar, but actually students do like them tailored to their particular course, and to feel that the information is made for them, not for a generic pool of people. Then we spoke as well about the importance, I suppose, of, as careers advisors, of us using our network and our connections. One of the students were saying, look, I've never gotten a job through my CV, which is, you know, sure, we all know that so many jobs are gotten through network. And we were saying, look, part of our role has to be to help students to network themselves, but also to connect them to our network. So we were saying kind of connectivity is maybe one of our opportunities. And then, you know, hybrid delivery, I suppose, you know, again, students were saying that they're so used now to being at home for so much of their time that they don't really hang around the campus the same way that they did before. So, and then, let me think, and then another thing that I think was mentioned just a few moments ago as well was, I suppose, an opportunity is for us to think, look, to help students think wider about their careers and to think about how personal and skills development, like in ACTIS and leadership roles and class rep roles, all build into career, and how do you start to do that from an early side. So they were the kind of challenges.
There's a lot, yeah, there's definitely an awful lot in there. I want to pick up on that issue around space and students maybe not coming in the same way that they used to. And it kind of loops back to your evidence base around your work and your impact. And of course, one of the groups here, I'm just having a look to see who this was, Jennifer Kwan has said here about this career services could also do better at advertising what value the service can provide to students in terms of employability and skills transitions, skills translation and transitions. So maybe there's a little bit of challenge from our audience here around have we got the advertising right? Have we got the messaging right? Angela, what about you in terms of future service delivery? Anything else you want to add? Or
yeah, and I think just your last point there, Deirdre, what the students said about advertising, and in our group it came up about involving the students more. And like one of the colleges would have had students to do TikToks promoting different elements of the career service. So in turn, then their friends would have looked at it rather than maybe the career centre doing a TikTok in a particular way that's not appealing to the audience. So I think definitely involving our students more, and we found that quite helpful ourselves. You know, on the first year of the lockdown, we involved the students to do some of our social media posts, and that really helped, and it kind of trained us into thinking. You know, we're probably been a lot more conservative in our approach, whereas they came up with it and it was still very professional, but it got, you know, the audience going. And another area that came up for us was thinking, be a lot more diverse in our thinking. You know, diversity should be at the top. You know, our student population now has really, really changed for us. And, you know, one example, I suppose, a colleague in TU Dublin and myself ran an event this year called Lifting the Lid, and we did it on, you know, on Zoom, and the amount of interaction we had, like over 2,000 people, students had linked in or joined in that day, which was amazing. And it was on the whole idea of diversity, covering the different areas. So it was something, and the feedback from that was, you know, amazing. So it was great. We hadn't really thought of it that much or put that much emphasis beforehand. Again, for a lot of the students, our students were saying to us, you know, we need the delivery to be a lot more flexible because we have to work. You know, we have to work to survive, to be in college. And, you know, if your service is if you have a hybrid model, you know, we can access that information wherever you store it later, you know. And we found that again through different events we would have ran on Instagram. So the information still remained up on the stories or there for us. And yeah, big things having a hybrid model. And also, I suppose the challenge, we're often wondering, are students engaging with us? And some are and some may not, or someone may take that information and come back later on it. And that's what I have found as well. And again, using social media more, you know.
Yeah, Angela, one of the things in the chat facility here is around helping students to manage workplace etiquette. Now, do you think career services, in a way, you know, are we confident and strong when it comes to being able to describe the modern workplace etiquette? Or is there something there maybe that the career service, there needs to be more done on that?
Yeah, I think certainly more needs to happen. And often what happens is when you get maybe an email from a student, and it could be, well, Angela, you know, it could be very informal. Are we guilty of not addressing that? And what I've found that I've done is, if I find I'm getting an email or something is sent to me, I actually ring that student and have that conversation. And what I have noticed is that in my presentations that I'm doing with students, I do call it out and say, look, you know, employers have mentioned sometimes maybe your email etiquette or whatever, maybe not be fit for business. And this is what I mean, or this is an example. And I kind of say to them, look, you don't know me well enough to kind of sit down and say, look, I'm going to write an inappropriate email to Angela or whatever the terms you'd use. So I said, just to think about it, you know,
yeah. So
and I said,
planting the seed.
You're unsure of what to write, so you just want to get it done. So I say, look, I'm giving you permission. If you have an email that's going out, you're unsure, write it, send it to me. And I tried that with a class this year, and it was amazing. Every single student, you saw they thought before they put their fingers to the keyboard.
Excellent. Oh, that sounds like a really good,
helpful. I think we do need to do that to address it. And I get just maybe a little bit on that. Sometimes what happens in college as well, if assignment is handed up late, some people say they leave them off with it. So it can come down to very small things. So they go out in industry, you know, well, I never had to hand in all my assignments on time, and yet, you know, my boss wants it, like, you know, so we might have to change a few things, Deirdre. I'm not too sure whether that's answered your question.
No, that is, you know, thank you. I think you've given a really great illustration of good practice there. Dave, just thinking about this future service delivery, Deirdre, not me, but Deirdre Linsky has said social justice must be integral to our service. I mentioned in my presentation earlier on, you know, that for critics of higher education, those people who don't see it as the really great pathway, they often say that universities have failed on social mobility. Now, I'm not out to debate it, but just interested in your take around future service delivery. How can career services in their small or their big way actually help to tackle that issue of social capital, social justice, etc.? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, Dave.
They say you should make no mistakes. I keep making the same one. Interestingly, I don't normally do it. I sent a comment into a radio show the other day, and they were talking about unpaid internships. Come to say they favour a certain group of students who can afford them, and they get the valuable experience, the skill sets, which then creates the vicious cycle of they get ahead and creates greater distance. So even from a policy perspective, kind of things that we would actually even advertise, on jobs boards, it should be minimum wage or expenses or whatever. So it's an interesting take on that. I remember the Hodgkinson work around what students perceive to be opportunity or not for themselves, based on their class and their lived experience, and like the Bourdieu, the cultural capital and the social capital piece. I think part of our role is political in some ways, and we can be the rises all boats, and we have to challenge ourselves and our perceptions of what success is, and challenge the individuals with whom we work, who may have narrow perceptions based on lived and life experiences. And then you have the flip end of the spectrum, I think, as well. And when you're working in an impartial way, you got almost called the Joneses syndrome, where there is expectations of students from the parents was an engineer or a doctor or whatever, and yet then you create that tension of not being the good model of the family. So I think in our work, and the way in which we work in an impartial and confidential way, I think we have that scope through the questioning and our skill sets to help people reflect on lives that they're living and they'd like to live, all things being equal. And I think that's very skillful. It's an art form in many ways to actually to give students the space and permission and the freedom, and to build that rapport with the student to enable them to do that. And I think we can also, as an organisation, we can begin to lobby at a political level and a strategic level, social justice issues, diversity issues, etc. Making sure that we all conform to universal design, etc.
I think it's very.
Sorry, just in more general terms, I was thinking of, not necessarily just around that issue, but if you think about it at a very strategic level from ourselves, and what's success in education? Who's defining success, and what's our role within that? If you see it through the lens of students coming to college, you've got social, personal, academic, and vocational domains of their lives. How do we input and influence and support that to optimize each of those elements? And I think, as David was saying, I think through partnerships with colleagues in the university, embedded in a curriculum that values co-curricular activity as well as straightforward, vocational training. I think that's one way to do it. That broadens our role, I think, as well, and our skill sets that are required in understanding that emotional side, the psychological side, skills development side, and then maybe the use of technology that it makes it a broader access to information. But it's our real value added is we give people the lenses by which they can critique information and experience to make better futures for themselves. And that's a skill set. And I think we don't sell that well enough. You can see I'm getting frustrated here, but we don't sell that well enough, I think.
No, I think it's, we'll come back to that issue about visibility and how, in essence, you get that message out, all those positive things that we've heard today. And I do have to say, I was in a group where there was a bit of challenge from one of the students around, all is not perfect in the careers service. So it's really that student, it was very brave of them to come in and say what they really thought. And in essence, we want a bit of both, don't we? We want to get the voice of the students, and we want to be able to tackle maybe help address some of the inequality that's maybe out there. I think it's interesting, again, just looking, I'm going to come to Catherine now in a second. Catherine, there's a conversation going on here. Christine Fitzgibbon said that she finds there's little conversation on how students should present themselves in the workplace. Although it seems obvious, I think it needs to be discussed. And then Judy has come back to say, professionalism in the workplace is a module integrated into the curriculum for all placement students delivered by Careers, and has received very positive impact. So sort of thinking about that, supports that need to be in place. Do you think, is there any other examples that you can give, or is there anything else that you think in terms of that future service delivery, how it can be strengthened beyond what we're hearing from the students so far?
Yeah, I think it's a really important aspect for our work readiness, but also a sort of a professional confidence and awareness piece that we sort of have a responsibility, I suppose, to both expose and sort of provide guidance in terms of how it is you conduct yourself. And I suppose within my own service and practice, where placement is a key part of programs, there would be preparation sort of workshops around sort of workplace etiquette and that area of things that have been touched on already. And I think the examples of what students have done in the past and the implication of that is often the best. Where he lands quite well with students and saying, yes, actually, I can see how that mistake was made because I would have made that mistake too, but now I see the impact of that. So I think the real life scenario, Deirdre, is a really useful, I think, tool to do that. And then workshops around scenarios and then getting them to work through the model through which the framework which you're talking about, employability and professionalism. And that idea of so many of our employers say, I just want somebody with common sense, Catherine, you know, and that idea of what common sense is depending really, some of this is maybe common when you've been in employment for a while, or you've been in professional scenarios, but not everybody has been. So I think that idea of having them work through the scenarios themselves is really important, and where you have got workshops for that embedded in placements, I think is really a really good angle, because they must do that as part of their preparation. But outside of that, in terms of general employability, I think using our alumni well, also coming back in and speaking about their experiences. I feel, again, you're hearing somebody who sat where they were sitting not too long ago, or in some cases further afield, but that you're actually hearing from their perspective what they deemed was impactful for them in their career progression, or what they're looking for as a current employee. So I think they're tools in which are really useful to get the student thinking themselves and being critical about behaviours or behaviours which are approaching those day-to-day professionalism tasks.
I can speak from first-hand experience of taking on a graduate who finished with a first-class honours degree, who went abroad, got stuck in Australia, but managed to get back during COVID, before lockdown, and spent a year in his bedroom, where basically, the whole idea of exposure to the world of work had just disappeared. And I think there are lots of students, certainly from the voices that we've heard in this conference, where for different reasons they are anxious, around that, getting exposure to and experiences of the world of work. And David, I want to come on to you, because Table 12 said that accredited placements and internships are so valuable for future career. Do you think, David, there's enough accredited and paid internships for students nowadays?
It's an interesting question, Deirdre, because competitive market to find quality placements or internships, whatever you want to call them, for the number of students who seek them. I mean, UCD 13 years ago when I started, there would have been very few academic internships, as we call them, credit bearing. And now we have about 1,500 students going out a year, quite apart from the clinical disciplines. And I imagine many people on the call are similar. So are there enough? I don't think there are enough at the right quality. I think certainly there are issues around payment that I would have concerns about, and we're about to start a review of our internships framework at the university, and that's one of the areas that will come up for review and discussion. I think as a tool, they're incredibly useful. I think we need to know what it is they're about. So some of my academic colleagues at UCD would see an internship as being the practical application of their discipline. I see it as the development of the student professionally and personally. And I suppose these days employers see it as an extended interview. So I'm not sure we're all coming from the same space, and I think we need to, in order to maximize the benefits of it. I think the people have mentioned the preparation of students, and it sounds like there's some really, really good stuff going on. And I think that's very variable. And yet I think it's incredibly important that students are properly and well prepared for whether it's work culture, behaviour, etiquette, whether it's what's going to be expected of them. And I think it's incumbent on the employers as well who are engaging with us to recruit the students, that the students are prepared or inducted in a way that prepares them for operation in the workplace. It's not just something which is our responsibility. So I think what I would like to see more of, Deirdre, and what we've lost over the years, I've been around a long time, as you well know. I remember going into HE Careers work whenever students could undertake like a summer internship that might allow them to try out HR, marketing, finance, and I don't know, training and development to see what they liked. And obviously the employment landscape has moved to the point where employers see it as a talent acquisition tool. And we've lost something from a career exploration point of view. I do get faculty saying to me, sure, they come back transformed from the internship. But we know through the data we collect through career registration that about 20% of our students haven't done an internship, still don't know what they want to do. And I don't think that's recognised as much as it should be. I think we just see it as a route into a job these days.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And we've talked a lot about students, and we've talked about the academics, and we've talked about careers staff. What about employers? Shona, from your experience, like, is there more that can be done to improve that, let's call it customer, that employer service that careers services are so sorry, I'm not wording this very well, but that career services and their employer engagement, what can career services do more? If we've got any employers in the room here, what would be your response from an HE perspective?
Yeah, I think we have to listen to their needs. We have to understand their pain points, be able to come up with meet what their needs are. So I don't think it can be constantly about us to recruit our students. I think we also have to be able to provide them with, whether it's talent management solutions, experts within the university, whether that's research or all benefits that they can get from the university community. I think we have to be really holistic in how we present our services to and try and meet a breadth of their needs so that they're strong and engaged partners with us. So I know that at Ulster we have the past 2 years done an employer survey, and that's been really to engage in the whole university in this. So I think that's important. To their survey, contribute to that as well, but it gives you a really good evidence base to understand what it is they're looking for from HE. As experts to employers, they understand that very often we go beyond the scope of what a career service might do. And so I think that we have to present our solutions and deliver that expertise to them. And again, just stay connected with them. I think that through the whole disruption of COVID, the move to ended recruitment and selection, we have to stay with them in that space as partners and help them to navigate that space as best we can, and sharing experiences of other employers so that they feel that we are the go-to place to help them. So for us, we want to make that whole employer experience as streamlined and as connected. It can be very difficult for employers because of the size and scope and the multiple different touch points that we have. So if we can make those touch points their services streamlined as possible, I think we'll engage with the micro businesses, the SMEs, the enterprise agencies, and all of those other representative groups that we deal with. So it's such a we're not the only solution problem in terms of higher education, but we do. I think we can be part of the best practice way in terms of universities do that.
Oh, that's great. I heard a conversation earlier around the table of someone who had a student that went to another geographical part of Ireland, and they said, oh, if only we had been able to connect, you could have shared maybe your placements with me. And I think that kind of leads us nicely also into sort of thinking about the association and, you know, as a national representative body, it would be really good to sort of think about what do you think it should be providing to its members beyond what it's providing now. So let me leave that with you for a minute, but I want to do a quick and fun exercise with all of our panel contestants. And we've only got a few minutes, so this is just very, very quick. Think of a highly successful person, and our audience might want to do this as well. Think of a highly successful person that you admire. If they decided that they were going to assess or measure the impact of the careers service, how would they begin? Now, it could be your mother. It could be a pop star. It could be a footballer. It could be an entrepreneur. Sometimes it's good to take yourself out of your own physical body and space and think about solving a problem. How would someone else do it? So anyone on the panel ready to put up their hand and tell me who have you chosen and what would they do? Have you got a, I'm springing it on the panel here. We've got Dave. Well done, Dave.
I don't have my answer formulated. Being very extroverted, I get the answer as I'm talking almost. But
that's okay. We've only got a few minutes, so just very briefly.
The guy that comes to mind is Pep Guardiola, and his level of detail is just incredible. So he breaks up the pitch into different spaces, and then looks at patterns of play within that. So there's something around segmenting the audience that are various stakeholders and how we're meeting those. They're very critical.
That's great. Thank you, Dave. Let's go to Catherine next. Catherine, have you got someone in mind?
Yeah, I do. It's Joanne Hession of the LIFT program, I think, is a really inspiring woman, and she has a clear set of values in which she operates by. And I think what her starting point, I can't speak for her, but from engaging with her, would be that very much around understanding the values of what is important to your career service and going with that first, and then involving those who are the recipients in any decision that you make. So I think that's what I will go for now.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you. What about Angela?
Yeah, I suppose I'd be just thinking of the weekend and one of our Irish rugby players who now trains the team that won. I've actually forgotten the team now after I was thinking about it, but Ronan O'Gara. And it was just interesting listening to him, and you remembering him playing on the Irish team, and then some of the analysis post-match on Sunday, and they were looking at how he almost went around with a little black notebook and took all the good points that other managers, trainers, coaches had through all his career, and it's like he brought them all together and brought them with this French team. And apparently his kind of pre-match talks was all about how they are the better team on the day, and he filled it up, which really I suppose came in with today as well, is statistics and evidence based why they were.
Yeah.
And I just thought,
fantastic.
I don't do that, that would be a completely different model for me to take, but he definitely had the evidence was there why they were going to win and why they were the better team. So just
great.
Off the top of my head.
Thank you. Caroline, and our audience, put in the chat, who are you thinking of in terms of how someone, whether it's your mother, a pop star, a footballer, an entrepreneur, how might they look at how you would assess the impact of a career service? Students, I hope you'll also join in. Caroline.
I got stuck then when you said mother, so I kind of stuck with that one. And I was thinking, God, if I was asked to ask my mum, I think how she'd assess it is, if you met, when you're out and you might meet a student that graduated 10 years ago, and they'd say, oh my God, now because of what we did, this is where I am today. And I think maybe that's how I think is a nice way as well to measure it, is to think, if you were to ask someone 15 years later, did what you did in college have an impact in bringing you to where you are today? That I think might be a nice way to look at it as well.
Yeah, so your mother would encourage you to have testimonies. Sounds great. Shona.
Yeah, I was actually going to Kitty Piper. She is a UK author who we have used as part of Ulster. Really inspirational, motivational speaker. We've brought her in to work with staff and students to do that whole inspiration piece of work. But she also has a book where she does daily affirmations. All of them could apply to the work of employability, and all that I've thought about is what you do makes a difference. It does. And it's really about the fact that every kind word that you offer, give, can make it change their lives. Never underestimate your impact. Some of what we do you can't measure, some of it we'll never know the impact that we have. So I think we have to believe individual services that is valuable, and it's not always possible to measure all of it.
Yeah.
There's other things just really good as well, is comparison is the fastest way to feel unhappy. And we have to stop comparing ourselves to others. Lead to the kind of KPIs that we have. Sometimes they don't always tell the true narrative of what we do. And I think some things like that are just focus on alongside all of the other stuff as well.
Absolutely. And interesting from a student perspective, you know, the students were saying they sometimes compare themselves around, you know, how they're performing, you know, against other students, you know, and also the gender issue is coming up quite a bit here. Christine said really insightful. I think it's a good discussion for women in the workplace and how to present themselves to be confident and take on leadership roles. Now, I want to come back to David last but not least on this, and then we're going to sort of see if there are any other questions from the audience. So David, what about you? Who would you have in mind?
Okay, so I've got a couple, but I've obviously just picked the one. Not that you would know to look at what you're seeing in the screen, but I used to play tennis a lot. And although I don't play it anymore, obviously, I still love tennis, and I've been a huge fan of Serena and Venus Williams since they came out on the professional tour many, many years ago. And I suppose what I love is that just huge determination to succeed, you know, that ability to train and get better and constantly improve, to set goals and achieve those, and to do it not like a flash in the pan, but to do it over time. And I suppose if they were coming to UCD, and they'd be very welcome, if anybody knows them, if they were coming to UCD, I imagine they're going to be looking to enable us to set objectives and work through how we're going to achieve those, and do it over with longevity in mind, as opposed to something that just lasts for a few years or whatever.
Oh, those are some great examples. We did this exercise with the team, and they came up with Beyonce, and I thought that was brilliant. Around how would Beyonce solve this problem, around looking at how you would measure impact. And obviously music and dancing was part of that, but also determination and focus. So I hope that really gives some insight. Now, I said we were going to end with this question about for AHECS as a national representative body, what would the audience like AHECS to provide more of? There's always this thing about what would success look like? What could it do more of? Or what should it maybe stop doing? So I'd like to just encourage the audience to put some thoughts into the chat facility. And maybe just anyone in the panel, is there anything from your perspective that you think the association should do more of, or should maybe stop doing? Any volunteers?
I seem to be always first. I think some of the Lunch and Learns, and Caroline's been intimately involved in them, and the Lunch and Learn series, a whole range of topics involving members has been wonderful, and to be really lauded for doing so. And obviously Gavin and Trevor have really put their foundations in place for that. I think more of that, the sharing of good practice, that we're all in the ship alone. I think that looking outwards into the future and speaking to people like yourself, Deirdre, is really important. And getting an Irish chatbot could be good. We've benefited a lot from economies of scale. I think the more we do of that, and I think training and development is absolutely key to who we are as a profession. If we believe in ourselves, I think as Sean is saying there, and how we have an impact, how we make impact, maybe supporting us in how we, get data and analyze data would be important and then how we send that data out to various audiences. But I think to have that inner confidence and resilience within ourselves and belief within ourselves, that we know what we're about and what backed up with here. That's a big thing for me. Is we've done a lot of training ourselves. Most of us are postgraduates in this area. There's people doing life coaching courses for 6 weeks, and all of a sudden they are the sexy thing around. And our whole identity piece, I think, is an important one that we work on.
Yeah, that sounds great. Anyone else? Angela, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just adding on from Dave, what Dave said, because I think Trevor and Gavin have brought the executive and the AHECS on a new direction. And even maybe following on from today when we started, the students' perspective, is there a way that we can kind of maybe have an advisory group of students that could feed into the executive and the larger AHECS team then, if that's something that we could look at? That's just one thought.
That sounds great. Sounds a great idea. Students out there, if you're still with us, are you up for that opportunity? It'll look great on your CV. And I hear they do very good lunches as well. So you'll be well looked after. Caroline, anything from your perspective?
Well, I think what I love most about AHECS is the community and, like Dave said, the sharing of best practice. So that's something continue, because that's what I think. Like when I first came into careers, I'd actually never met another careers person, and so I think this group for me I just find fantastic, and I think the training and development as well that we do is just brilliant. So I think the networking, the camaraderie, the sharing of best practice and the training and development are things that I like and would love to see continue.
Well, I think that resonates with the audience in that I heard some people say, oh, I worked in private sector and this is my first experience of working in a university and I'm having to get used to the rules and the regulations, maybe not the same freedoms in some cases in private sector. So it's so important to have that community of practice and community of interest. And I love the idea of lunch and learn. Maybe you'll also have afternoon tea with scones and tea and coffee, and maybe I'll send you some Devon cream as well. So that all sounds great. Anyone else want to add any more to that? I'm conscious that we're due to close the conference in 5 minutes' time. I'm not sure, David, whether our hosts want to come back and say a few words or whether you would like me to close the conference. So just give me a stare. Right on cue. There's Trevor. Excellent. Folks, doesn't it show you what a great association? So organized, so efficient. So yeah, I'll hand over to Trevor. And just Trevor, on behalf of everyone, really, just to say to you and Gavin and Caroline behind the scenes, who's helped very much with the technology, I just want to sort of thank all of you personally, but also thank our audience for staying with us for today as well.
Thank you, Deirdre. I want on behalf of the association and indeed all the delegates to say a huge thank you to you. I think this afternoon's sessions have been absolutely superb, leading on from your keynote this morning. So we so appreciate you coming and being part of our conference and really engaging, across the afternoon. It's been fantastic. There's a lot of great discussion there, both in the roundtables and in that panel session. So if we were in a room together, we'd be doing a round of applause. I don't know how we do this virtually, but I hope you get our sense of. Thank you so much, Deirdre, for
thank you.
All you've done.
Thank you. And I just wanted lastly to say, I saw in the chat, which I didn't see earlier, there was a great example again of role models in there. So thank you to the audience who shared their role models. I think it was great, from mindful coaches to people with disability who've overcome all sorts of challenges. So thank you, and I hope we'll meet in person at some stage.
Thank you, Deirdre. There's a few other thank yous that I just want to do before we bring this to a close. I want to say thank you to the panel here, to Caroline, David, Catherine, Shauna, Angela, and Dave, for your contributions both on the panel and in the sessions. I would also like to reiterate what Gavin said this morning. Our thanks to our sponsors. We couldn't do this without them. That's Grad Ireland and Career Set, who kindly financially sponsored us to do this. Just reflecting back also to say thank you to Bernard and to Lisa from Sybil for their contributions to all of the facilitators. We had 27 facilitators, I think, facilitating different table conversations. So we appreciate all of you being involved in that. There's somebody just on off mute, so it's back feeding. There we go. Thank you. I also want to pay tribute to the conference committee because we're all volunteers doing this, and this doesn't happen by accident. So we had David Foster, Dave Kilmartin, Caroline Kennedy, Catherine Staunton, and Gavin and myself who pulled this together in the last few weeks. So I want to say a huge thank you to them for all their hard work. This was a team effort, getting all of the speakers and getting all this organised. And I also want to pay a huge tribute to Caroline Williams. Caroline, you need to come on camera and let people see your face. Caroline joined us 13 weeks ago and has done a superb job, not just on the conference, but across everything in AHECS. Is she gone? She's maybe jumped off, but I do want to record our thanks to you, Caroline, for all your hard work, briefing speakers, making sure everybody was where they needed to be. And there she is now. So a huge thank you to you, Caroline. You made all this work behind the scenes, and we couldn't have done it without you. And also to a couple of Gavin's team have been instrumental behind the scenes as well, Aisling and Martin. So a huge thank you to both of you. It has been a really successful event. I suppose just a final couple of things. I think Gavin is going to come on here and join me as well. This is our last event as co-chairs. We've done 4 years in this role, and a number of the exec are also stepping down. So I want to thank all the exec who supported us, Catherine, Angela, Caroline, David and Dave Kilmartin. You've been superb to work with. We have so enjoyed it, and also welcoming the new execs. So Dawn O'Connor, Orla Bannon, Adele Caraway and Fanula Rahali are stepping in the next month or so to lead the exec. I suppose just reflecting back, we started out on a path 4 years ago. We had great plans, a great strategic plan after we spent like a couple of days away to do a new website to reinvigorate member engagement. And we brought in IE Digital and went through lots of different workshops and had a massive presentation. And then the great leveler, COVID-19 hit and everything changed. So it's certainly been a lot of work reinventing the service, but it has been hugely rewarding. And I want to say on a personal level, it's been a huge honor to serve you as co-chair over the last 4 years. We have achieved a lot. We've run a lot of conferences. We've run a lot of online events. We've put a lot of newsletters out, run a lot of training, put out a lot of awards. It's been an incredible journey. I think AHECS has always been built on collaboration, and one of the things I often say to students when I speak publicly to them or even individually and launching new programs, I often say to them, you get out what you put in, and that's trying to encourage them to put themselves in and get involved. And that has been the case for me, and I know Gavin would share this. We have got way more out of AHECS than anything we've contributed by way of our time, our energy, or ideas. We've made great friends. We've benefited from some incredible training. We've built great networks, and we've made friends, and we've had so much fun along the way. It has been a great laugh. I couldn't even begin to share some of the stories of some of the things we've got up to. We've been in Canada at the Global Career Summit and had fun in Niagara Falls and all the rest of it. So it's been phenomenal. This is all pre-scripted for me. So the last time we were together in person was in 2018 here in Belfast. And I'm just literally reading off an auto cue here. So it says it is the best AHECS conference that has ever been run. We are planning to come back together again in person in 2024. And if we have a virtual drum roll, we are delighted to announce that Dave Kilmartin and his team in TU Dublin will be hosting us in 2024 in their new Grange-Gorman campus. It's a fabulous, fabulous campus. He hosted us for an exec meeting a couple of months ago, and their new buildings are absolutely superb. So it's a very appropriate venue for us to come back together after 6 years of doing everything online. So just on behalf of Gavin and myself, thank you so much for a great conference and a great 4 years. And we shall see you all soon. The room will stay open. We'll go back out into conference mode and you can still network, etc. So thank you all very much.
Trevor, just before you finish up, sorry, you probably muted me a few minutes ago, but I just want to make sure that we just thanked you and Trevor, or you and Gavin. I suppose first the biennial working group as well. An excellent event, I think everyone would agree. And as you said earlier on, Caroline Williams is with us just 13 weeks, and it's certainly a lucky 13 weeks for us. Caroline has just coped. Even today, I think I sent her about 10 emails. So we really appreciate, you know, it was a hard time to come in, but Caroline, you have gone above and beyond, and nothing has been a problem for you. So we really appreciate that. And again, I say the working group, the biennial working group, and but last but not least as well, I suppose, to kind of repeat what Trevor has said, the AHECS executive has been a great team to work with, and as Trevor said, you know, what you put in, you get back so much. Again, we've had lots of laughs at each other and with each other over the few years. And you know, Caroline mentioned earlier on, you know, the support and that each one gives each other. And you know, whether you're from a 10-person service, 1-person service, everyone's there to support you. And we really will miss Trevor and Gavin and their yin and yang approach to the meetings and their style of delivery. Some people, they call them the grumpy old men, but we'd never call them that to their face. And David Foster, I don't know, is David gone? You know, David again. Oh, there you are, David. Sorry, it's front of screen. Has contributed an awful lot, and we really appreciate that. So, and Catherine, Dave, and myself are staying on, but Caroline, I think, is our social media. Caroline's everything, you know. So again, Caroline Kennedy, thank you so much for all that you've given, and yours definitely be a hard act to follow. So on behalf of everybody, thank you very much for all you've done, and looking forward to staying on for the next executive and welcoming the new members. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. I think we're all on mute there now.
Thank you. We'll go back to conference mode now. So the floor will stay open, I think, for the next few minutes. So you can still have conversations with people back in the conference. So thank you. See a few of you in Limerick in the next 24 hours.